So let's look at this one. We've got the square root of -3 over the square root of 14. So we have to rationalize. We have to get rid of the square root of negatives first. Remember, anytime you have the square root of a negative, convert it to be written in terms of I first. So this is going to be the square root of -1 times the square root of 3. Right? I'm going to keep the bottom the same. And then the square root of -1 is I. So I'm going to get I root 3 over root 14. Now we're going to do what's called rationalizing the denominator. Rationalizing the denominator means no radicals in the denominator. So when something says simplify completely, that means no radicals in the denominator. And the way we do that is by rationalizing the denominator. Here's what it looks like. In order to rationalize the denominator, we need to multiply the top and the bottom by whatever is going to get rid of that radical. So we know if we have a radical 14 and we multiply it by itself, then the radical will be gone and we'll just be left with the 14. So that's what we're going to do. If we multiply by radical 14 down here, we know that radical 14 times radical 14 is just going to give us 14. And that will eliminate the radical, which is what we're trying to do. But we can't just do it on the bottom. We have to do it on the top and the bottom. So that way it doesn't change the value because it's like we're just multiplying by 1. Right? Any number over itself is 1. So then on the top, we end up with I still, and 3 times 14 is what? 30 plus 12 is 42. And then on the bottom, we have just 14. Now, can we think of any numbers that go into 42 that we could factor out? Let's see if we can simplify that. If we do a factor tree for 42, let me do it up here. We would have 2 times 21, and then this is 3, and then this is 7. We don't have any pairs, which means we can't simplify this any further. So that would be our answer. I root 42 all over 14. All right, let's take a look at this one. In this one, remember, we can't have a radical on the bottom. And I, even though it doesn't look like it, is a radical because I represents the square root of -1. So how do we get rid of that square root? Well, we multiply. Oh, actually, I put a, okay. We're going to have 7 over 10i. And we're going to multiply by, well, we could multiply by the denominator, or we could just multiply by the square root part, which is the I. So if I multiply by I on the top and bottom, I'm not changing the value because I over I is equal to 1. I would get 7i on top, and on the bottom I would get 10i squared. Now, we've looked at it a few times already. We know that I squared is equal to -1. So then this will end up being 7i over -10. Or we could just write it as -7/10 I. Or we could write it as -7i over 10. They're all equivalent. Whether you put the negative on the bottom, out in front, or on the top, they're all the same. And we've rationalized the denominator.